Welcome to Why We Love What We Love. Let's start with a story that almost sounds fictional. In 2002, a young tech millionaire, fresh out of selling PayPal, walked into a room full of aerospace engineers and boldly declared that he was going to colonize Mars. Not build a rocket, not send a satellite, not partner with NASA. No, he wanted to colonize another planet. People laughed at him, and honestly, they had good reason to. This wasn't a scientist, a pilot, or an engineer. This was a guy who made online payment software. Yet, 2 decades later, the same man is responsible for one of the most remarkable engineering achievements in modern history: reusable rockets that land themselves. But this story isn't really about Elon Musk. It's about you. It's about why your brain actually works against your dreams, and why a little dose of delusion is the secret ingredient behind every impossible breakthrough. Let's explore why the people who change the world are never the most talented, the most experienced, or even the smartest. They're simply the ones unafraid to believe in something that doesn't exist yet. The impossible barrier. In 1983, the Swiss watch industry stood on the edge of complete collapse. Entire factories were shutting down, thousands of craftsmen were losing their livelihoods, and an industry built on centuries of tradition was suddenly considered irrelevant. The reason was simple: Japan's quartz technology was cheap, accurate, and accessible. Nearly overnight, the world decided that mechanical watches, expensive, delicate, and less accurate, were unnecessary. Experts declared the end of Swiss horology. Watchmakers were mocked as outdated relics. Customers abandoned them for digital displays and battery-powered precision. It was one of the biggest technological disruptions in the history of consumer goods. But in the middle of this crisis, a single individual refused to accept what everyone else called reality. Gérald Genta, designer, visionary, and professional contrarian, believed that the world didn't just want accuracy, it wanted identity and craftsmanship. While others tried to copy quartz or reduce costs, Genta doubled down on creativity. He designed a steel luxury sports watch that defied every convention: exposed screws, an octagon-shaped bezel, and a price tag that seemed insane at the time. The Royal Oak was born into ridicule. Dealers laughed, critics sneered, customers were confused. Why pay more for steel than for gold? Why buy a watch that wasn't the most accurate? Why trust a design that looked like nothing before it? Because Genta wasn't selling precision. He was selling meaning, artistry, and symbolism. His belief, irrational to others, became the foundation of a revolution in watchmaking. The psychological breakthrough. The first year brought disappointment. Only 1,200 Royal Oak watches were sold, barely enough to keep Audemar's Piguet alive. But Genta wasn't concerned with short-term numbers. He understood something deeper: that people don't always choose the most practical option. They choose what speaks to their identity. Within a few years, the Royal Oak became a cultural icon. When Genta later designed the Nautilus for Patek Philippe, he repeated the miracle. Suddenly, the dead mechanical watch industry was reborn. Today, collectors wait years just to get their hands on one of these pieces, often paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in the second-hand market. So what happened? Quartz remained more accurate, more durable, and more affordable. But Genta wasn't competing on logic. He was competing on imagination. He believed in a future others couldn't see, and that belief, irrational on the surface, became the catalyst for an entire industry's survival. This is delusion used correctly. Not madness, not denial, just a refusal to accept limits defined by others. The neuroscience of delusion. There is a part of your mind designed solely to protect you. It doesn't care about dreams, ambition, or creative breakthroughs. Its only job is survival. This is why negative thoughts hit harder than positive ones. This is why fear stays longer than courage. And this is why your brain constantly warns you about failure even when nothing is wrong. This ancient danger detector, the negativity bias, was vital when humans faced lions and starvation. But today, it quietly sabotages ambition. It convinces you not to start a business, not to try a new skill, not to take risks, and not to imagine big futures. Most people assume this voice is truth. It isn't. It's protection disguised as realism. But high achievers operate differently. They use a mental phenomenon psychologists call positive illusion, the ability to believe in a future that isn't logical, likely, or guaranteed. They see possibilities where others see disasters. They underestimate obstacles and overestimate their own capability. On paper, this is delusion. In practice, it's the engine of human progress. The Sara Blakely case study. Sara Blakely didn't come from money. She didn't have connections. She wasn't trained in fashion or manufacturing. She sold fax machines door to door. But she had an idea so simple that every company she pitched rejected it. Footless pantyhose, a product they believed no one needed. But Sara held a picture in her mind that felt more real than her current circumstances. She imagined success with absolute clarity: store shelves, celebrity endorsements, magazines, interviews. She visualized it so deeply that her brain treated it as a memory rather than a fantasy. After 2 years of rejection, a small factory finally agreed to help. The rest is history. Spanx went from an idea to a billion-dollar empire. Blakely became the world's youngest self-made female billionaire. When asked what allowed her to push through endless rejection, she answered, "If I knew how hard it would be, I never would have started." Logic would have stopped her. Delusion carried her through. The exponential curve. Most people misunderstand progress. They expect a straight line. But real growth is exponential. It's slow, invisible, and deeply discouraging in the beginning. Months pass with no results. The world doesn't validate your effort. Nothing seems to work. This is the valley of disappointment, a quiet psychological collapse where most people quit. Yet underneath the surface, roots are growing. Skills are forming. Momentum is building. An unseen micro-progress is preparing for a jump. Success looks sudden only to those who weren't there for the boring years. The Quincy Jones principle. Quincy Jones spent a decade struggling. Small gigs, cramped apartments, loans, and rejection. Nothing about his life suggested greatness. But he kept going long after most people would have stopped. Then, opportunities emerged. Film scores, industry recognition, and eventually a partnership with a young Michael Jackson. Thriller became the most successful album in history. Quincy's name became immortal. But the breakthrough didn't come from exceptional luck. It came from exceptional endurance. He stayed in the game long enough for luck to arrive. The psychological mechanism. Inside the brain, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex checks reality. For most people, it blocks imagination, ambition, and risk. But high achievers show lower activation here when imagining their goals. Their brains allow possibilities to exist without immediately killing them with logic. They aren't blind to obstacles. They simply interpret difficulty as part of the process, not a signal to stop. Where others see impossibility, they see not yet. The Pete Carroll story. Pete Carroll was fired twice as an NFL head coach. People considered him finished. But Carroll carried a belief so strong and so absurd that it eventually reshaped his career, that he could build a championship program instantly. USC hadn't won in decades, but he turned the team into a powerhouse. Later, he returned to the NFL and won a Super Bowl with the Seahawks. It wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was belief strong enough to infect everyone around him. The practical application. The question isn't whether you're capable. It's whether you can adopt the psychological tools that high achievers use effortlessly. First, separate identity from feedback. Rejection doesn't define you. It shapes the strategy, not the dream. Second, extend your timeline. Nothing meaningful happens in a year, but everything can happen in 10. Third, surround yourself with people who believe in abnormal futures. Fear spreads quickly. So does belief. The uncomfortable truth. Most people call themselves realists, but what they truly are is afraid. Fear dressed in rational language. Logic used as camouflage. But realism never built masterpieces. Realism never changed industries. Realism never rewrote history. Thanks for watching. Please like the video, press the subscribe button, and also drop your thoughts in the comment section.